All right. Let's see here. Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right. So I'm just gonna go for it. And also, I want to wrap this up relatively quickly because I want to go and have breakfast at Life Alive, and it's already a little bit late today. So, this session is the overachievement cycle, which is on page 141 in the book. And so, I was just on LinkedIn, and one of the things that I was noticing and just becoming kind of like increasingly, mm, I don't know, like just, like, I guess the feeling of being like, "This isn't kind of a, like, vibe I wanna be in," is how, like, social media in general has a posting style that's really authoritative. Like, it's, like, really, like, speaks with this kind of absolutism, and and it just had me thinking about how these adaptations in the 3rd hub are so prevalent as far as the lack of vulnerability that is available, or is it just the lack of vulnerability that happens when our sense of power becomes so highly defended? And even in, a lot of this, like, professional posting, there's kind of a whole thing right now where you have folks who are, like, really trying to establish themselves as authorities. Like, this is, there's kind of like this notion of building a business, like a solopreneur, where your thoughts, your newsletter, your trainings are, like your business. So, and I think one of the challenges of this is, some people do it really well. Some people do it really well, but a lot of the offshoots lack the nuance. So as I'm looking through LinkedIn, and it's kinda like, just it's like seeing this, what I'm about to read on, like, really playing out, which is really low nuance posts, like, that aren't really taking any form of a risk. They're just sort of reversioning kind of colloquialisms, or, like, sort of already sort of, like, popular notions, like, said a different way, but they lack, vulnerability for the most part. Not all the time, not all the time, but I'd say, like, overall, like, reading through those posts, and maybe it's just my feed, maybe other people's feeds are, like, really awesome. Um, but yeah. So we're gonna do this. I woke up a little bit, like, I'm still getting over this cold kind of thing, and also I started taking this magnesium supplement that has, like, a wide spectrum of different magnesiums, and my dreams have been, like, hyper lucid. So I'm waking up feeling kind of out of sorts as well, and yeah, and working through that, like, waking up feeling kinda like a little, like, on the back foot in a sense. Like, the first night I took it, I woke up, and actually it was like my dreams had felt more lucid than my waking life, which was kinda more vivid, at least, things that were happening in my dreams. One of the things that's really funny is that in one of these dreams, I'd actually encountered some aspect of my personality, and I tried to parinama process it. Like, I tried to, like, put it through a process with TPM, and I couldn't. And when I woke up, like, later on, I remembered that part of the dream, and then I realized that part of the reason I couldn't do it is it isn't actually part of my personality. So there's nowhere I could go with it. it was just like part of this like sort of dream thing that was happening. So anyway, so we are going to read about the overachievement cycle. I'm a little bit kind of like froggy, and here we go. So we're still in the adaptations and holding patterns of the third hub, and this relates to power, individuality, um confidence, self-esteem and self-worth being interchangeable. And maybe, I mean, honestly, maybe, when I think about an optimization, I think changing self-esteem to self-worth in a future edition of the book's probably the move, because I think self-esteem is not as like commonly used a term, and it might be confusing because the use of the word confidence, I hear that a lot. And I think like comparing self-worth to confidence might be something that like more easily makes sense to people. So anyway, so I'm going to start reading. So the overachievement cycle. So when we depend on work to avoid the other areas of our life as an outlet to pursue perfectionism, or when we overwork to avoid potential embarrassment, we become the so-called perfect worker who relentlessly drives itself to outrun failure. But mistakes are inevitable, and instead of acting as reality checks or on the futility of perfectionism, they tend to accelerate the overachievement cycle. This is a cycle of simultaneously avoiding risk and hungering for validation, like a wheel that builds momentum as it spins, but ultimately steers us towards overwhelm and burnout. Yeah, my reading's a little bit like not super smooth today. Sorry. Okay, so characteristics of the overachievement cycle. Works to outrun failure, criticism, and negative outcomes. Although they are ultimately inevitable, we're all human and fallible. Making mistakes accelerates risk aversion due to heightened shame and embarrassment. Pride in the ability to endure excruciatingly difficult situations and circumstances. High pain tolerance and disdain for so-called weakness. Perfectionism and high standards. Resentment of so-called freeloaders and or fears being one. Serves a master and revels in having subordinates. So here on page 142 in the book, and this is figure 6.1, we have an illustration of the overachievement cycle, which is, let's see where to start here. I'm going to start to the far right. Here. And I'm going to point out works to outrun failure, criticism, or negative outcomes. Now, this is something that I put this in the book because not only was it something that I had related to, but it's something that I have seen as an epidemic with high-performing people that do not achieve their potential. The high-performing folks who are essentially the load-bearing beams, the life force of any organization, who remain in positions that are smaller than they are. And so there's a great deal of conflict within that. But also, I mean, this is just high-performing people, even in ways like if you have someone, say an individual contributor on your team who's somebody who's coming up in their career, who fears taking risks, and that actually interferes with their ability to take the next leap or the next step in their evolution. Is that they're afraid of trying things that could possibly not work, like being the first person to try something. So, And this is someone so this is actually and let me give another take on this as a leader. So one of the things that leaders get really wrong with this phenomenon is they see high performing people and they push them further. There are very few people that are in this like overachievement cycle that actually um that their first priority is performance. Their first priority is outrunning shame, embarrassment, and failure, or the perceived shame and embarrassment that come from any form of failure. It's usually the first priority, and that all of the that the work and the dedication and the long hours goes in serving in the avoidance of that. And that's something, I came to really see as a leader and also as an individual contributor who would excel. It was that I realized that I was clearing the way to make winning my top priority. So I was like clearing my adaptations. So this was like early TPM stuff, is I was seeing these things, like I was seeing these qualities and realizing that I was actually serving them. So I was like clearing them out. And it was making me, from a formidable opponent, because all I wanted to do was win. I wasn't as concerned with like making myself feel better about things. I'm very much like that now, and it's not that it doesn't hurt. It's not that it doesn't. There isn't a little sting. It's like a bummer, but it's not enough of a bummer to avoid it because it's such an important part of iterating to be able to like optimize and get better at something. So and this is something, with leading people, and this is especially for your top performers, your elite level performers, is seeing this quality, and you notice that, you think, you'll if you're paying attention, that you'll give these people that are working so hard a couple notes, and it'll deflate them, like how they really don't like feedback. They'll be highly defended, and the feedback will be like just kind of like deflate them, and they won't even know why, because this syndrome doesn't carry with it a ton of self-awareness, just by its very nature, because self-awareness actually like evaporates it, or at least begins to disintegrate it. So you have this like hard work, this work ethic where you have people that are working around the clock, completely fixated. And the thing is inevitably, as you see in the bottom here, is there's an inevitable mistake or shortfall. I mean, always, 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 always. And that mistake may come from exhaustion. That mistake may come from taking on too much and fumbling, like a detail. I mean, it's just inevitable. There will be mistakes. There will be mistakes. You will miss goals. You will forget things. And some folks, they make the mistakes because like maybe the things in their family took over. So what happens sometimes is these are folks that like their iteration is actually like a overcorrection in the wrong direction, where they make the decision that, that's never going to happen again, like something that relates to their family overtaking their success. So, so more of a burden will be placed on their spouse. I have had in my career some of the proudest moments in my career are having spouses either write to me or talk to me at company parties and speak about how me working with, it's actually always been husbands, their husband on these matters has changed their family and changed their kids' lives, because I'm calling bullshit on it in a very compassionate way. but working with really the diversifying of an entire life. I've been doing this my entire career as a leader. So, this goes back to mid 2000s. So, yeah. So seeing it and calling it out. And I saw it because I knew it intimately. And for people with children, I saw them, in the office until midnight all the time, stuff like that. So anyhow, the mistake or the shortfall. So this thing where it's like it creates more of workaholism because it's like I'm never going to let that happen again. The mistake happens, and instead of being like, hey, maybe I could like kind of loosen the reins here, or hey, maybe I could try things in a different way. Risk, adding more risk. They just are like, I'm just going to work harder next time. I'm just going to work harder next time. So you have this like imagined or real shame and humiliation, right? That comes out of that. So it's like the inevitable mistake or shortfall. And then I think I like went a little bit ahead. I'm so sorry in that explanation. My bad on that. But it's like, so the inevitable shortfall, and then there's this kind of event that's like which is like imagined or real shame and humiliation. And the thing about this is like the mistake, like missing a goal or fumbling a deal, or for like whatever the thing is, is that this syndrome, we'll call it, creates a heightened activation when this happens. Heightened activation. It is like it's a much bigger deal than it actually is. So this goes back to the parinama tangle, which is the reflex creates a belief system, which creates a reality. The reality gets projected into the world reflects it back. This is a like prime example of the like a reality being formed around a mistake. So it's like making a mistake, and instead of being really constructive and saying, yeah, that was a mistake, here's what I do differently next time, or even maybe a correction, say like, I'm taking on too much right now and I think I need to figure out how to right size this situation. Or even if it's something along the lines of, in the short term, I'm willing to work this hard, but putting like gates on it instead of being like, as holistically, I need to become a person that never lets this happen again. To say, listen, in the short term for this thing that I want to accomplish, I ultimately will work harder and make some sacrifices. But here's the thing about the overachievement cycle. This is a syndrome where there are no long-term goals. It's just to keep working. Important point here. So doing the type of like um I don't, the word's not coming, but the iteration of saying like, I'm going to fence this off and work on this until I can achieve this particular goal, that actually isn't really a thing, because there is no sense of like longer term goals. It's just like it's an endless grind, and this is why burnout is such a big issue. These are people that, I'd see at professional events who'd be out networking, who'd be out, um, like attending talks and just like on their nights, and on their like after work, with no real clear sense of why. It's just like their career, like this notion of like a career versus an idea of this is where I'm trying to take my career. It's just being like really hyper fixated on like one's career without a sense of like, okay, I'm doing this so that I can have this. And even I'll take it one step forward, or further rather, which is one's career. Like why do you want your career to grow? Like why? And this is another thing. I think it's a really important part of this syndrome, which is just really getting into understanding yourself and in your second hub what your desires are for your life. Back to the Thomas Merton quote, which is, getting old is getting, or like, getting older or whatever is like getting to the top of the ladder and realizing you climbed the wrong one. There's just a lot of that. If you ask people like, what is your end result here? It's like what everyone wants. It's like, no, everyone doesn't want the same thing. Everyone does not want the same thing. And the more that we believe everyone does is points to our disconnection with our own desire, the uniqueness of it, the fingerprint of it, the unique suite of preferences and joys and fulfillments of one's own desire and feeling. So the thing that happens here is this imagined shame, as I think I jumped ahead earlier in this, is it blocks self-directed action and risk-taking because it creates this sort of like, ooh, I stepped out too far. So now I need to just like grind further. So it's like this risk avoidance and obedience, like puts it's like, I don't wonder, can I get this so you can sort of see me in it? See, yeah, look, doop-a-doop. It re-enters the cycle. It blocks self-directed action. So, and by self-directed action, I'm talking about being really clear about why. Like, why does my career matter to me? What outcome am I focused on here with this? Do I ultimately want to be able to live somewhere else? Do I ultimately want to retire at a certain age? Do I ultimately want to become a leader so I can start my own business? Do I ultimately want a job that's going to be where I make a lot more money and it's easier so I can spend more time with my family? And so really thinking more about like your aspiration in terms of how your career supports the life that you want to be living. So the thing is, this imagined or real shame and humiliation blocks that because it makes us like, oh shoot, I could just lose everything. So I need to like get back into this cycle. So it's like, so the risk avoidance and obedience leads to more of work to outrun failure, criticism, or negative outcomes. And then again, you inevitably are going to hit a snag, a challenge that you can't meet, goal, some mistake, whatever, and then back into this imagined shame and humiliation that's outsized relative to what is real here. And I mean, it's very rare. It's very rare that our mistakes that we make and our shortfalls can't be reconciled. In fact, I would go as far as saying that folks who overshoot in terms of their activation around their mistakes actually amplify the notion of what they've done. So there's really something to be said for having a very correct response in terms of matching the energy of the mistake you made and being able to, with emotional regulation, approach it with a real clear sense of like, here's how I learned from this mistake and iterate forward. Very, very, very important thing, because this truly is part of the tangle, which is you get people that are so overreactive from their errors that they actually just become really difficult culturally in an organization to manage, because now they have to process all of these feelings of inadequacy. And it's because it's so overwhelming to them, they're not able to take full responsibility for it. So it's like so usually there's some aspect of like, here's, why this was impossible for me. And like pointing the blame outwards to others. So that's another thing, is it leads to one of the worst things that you can do in a professional career, which is contribute to a like a toxic culture. I mean, look, if there's anything in terms of career advice, it is that becoming overly emotional and reactive and this is like, this cycle is someone who actually winds up burning themselves out, usually after a couple of years. And and the thing that you see, I think of all the times I've seen people who are like really emotionally regulated, um just kind of took things in stride, weren't trying to light up the world with their performance, were doing a good job, were focused, gave their best every day, still had, their family commitments, had balance in the rest of their lives. And maybe, they weren't, winning the trophies, or they weren't, but, B plus, and solid contributor in an organization. And when the other person burns out, when this overachievement cycle burns out, what winds up happening is they leave for one reason or the other. Either they become explosive, they become or they resign because they can't take it anymore. Or I mean, I've had people have just kind of breakdowns, burnouts, even behavior that leads to terminations. I mean, this is like a lot more common, I think, than I think most people would realize. A lot of times it really is like a self-directed, where a person kind of raises their hand and just can't take it anymore. And they go and they like search elsewhere for a place where, they believe they're going to not experience the hardship. Because it's once again, this doesn't carry a lot of self-awareness. So there's a lot of a sense that this is coming from the outside in, these tendencies. And this person, back to this person who's like the B plus player, they wind up just inheriting all of the work and advancement of the folks who were just like absolutely killing themselves. And they wind up achieving great, like, it's one of those things that's continued to blow my mind, is that it's like like the outlasting part. They outlast, and then they're there, and they wind up, keeping the deals, keeping the relationships, keeping the projects, and continuing with them, and winding up looking like stars and doing very well as a result of that. So, I'm talking about professional career here. I imagine that for some people watching this, that it is like very likely that, there's so many other applications for this. So many other applications for this. This is an entire thing. So anyway, did we get to it? Okay, there's a little bit of reading, and then I'm gonna wrap this. So a hallmark of the endurer is a sense of personal importance stoked by long, intense hours of work. It's often reminded that the boss ultimately holds the power, but believe but believes it's the one who deserves it. So the endurer invests in elaborate calculus to arrive at the conclusion that it is, in fact, the real one in control, and it's their work that's responsible for the boss's success. Whether this is true or not, the endurer misses the point. Power and leadership are obtained through greater capacity in all hubs, and over-identification and fixation on work lead to crowding out important facets of a fulfilling life, such as being able to feel deeply and to connect with family and friends. And that is that on that. So, yeah, I think we did it. All right, so that's it for this today. Thanks again for watching. Again, any interaction with this is so deeply appreciated, and any feedback also welcomed, and looking forward to seeing you next time. All right, bye.